Greeting adventurers and well met. Master of Dungeons here on the Master of Dungeons Twitch channel, twitch.tv/the Master of Dungeons, where we talk things D&D. Tavern Talks with Shifty Boar every Wednesday right now. We're actually considering tonight, we had a meeting tonight afterwards, we're considering changing the time slot for the Tavern Talks, maybe even taking a small hiatus from the show, but that's not guaranteed, something we're going to talk about tonight. But we have been going over the latest playtest 6 from the Wizards of the Coast Unearthed Arcana series, with the playtest rules for the 1D&D/D&D 5.5, however you want to say it. It's supposed to be backwards compatible with 5th edition, very similar to how 3.5 was with 3rd edition. We've been discussing some of the different rules changes. Obviously, I hadn't seen or read any of this stuff before we started reviewing it on the stream. PT7 might be coming out very soon as well. So if that does, obviously we will go ahead and continue talking about that with Tavern Talks when ever the time change, whenever we decide to put the stream on during the week. But real quick, before we went back, we were on page 62 last week with going over spells. We kind of looked at the spell list, and we were getting into the descriptions and how the spells were changed. But on Discord, someone was asking me about the Paladin Smites, and I was explaining that in the current playtest rules, the Paladins do not smite like they did before. Before, they could sacrifice a spell slot, and then they would get 2d6 or 2d8 of damage added to their attack if they wanted to use their Divine Smite, which is their second level ability. If the creature happened to be an undead or a fiend, they would get an extra die 8 on top of that. So a first level spell slot would give you 3 die 8 extra damage against an undead or a fiend, and the maximum number of dice that you could roll for a Paladin Smite would be 5 dice. For a Divine Smite, and I wanted to clarify that here, where actually the smites are gone, and now it's replaced with the ability of Paladin Smite. And what Paladin Smite is, to explain it again real quick, is you get, every time you get a certain level, like 2nd, 5th, 9th, 13th, 17th, you get a specific smite spell that you will always have prepared. And instead of your old smite ability, what you can do now is you can cast one of those spells without spending a spell slot. So for example, at 2nd level you can use Divine Smite, or you can use Thunderous Smite, as Divine Smite is now a spell. We'll check that out here in a little bit. But you can cast each of these spells once without expending a spell slot. And you must finish a long rest before you can use that benefit again, but you can still also cast them with spell slots. So Divine Smite, as it stood before, even the previous playtest, is now gone. So we're going to go back down here to page 62. And this is where we start with the spell description. So here are some of the design notes, spell updates, many main updates to this section since its last playtest version. Of course, if you want to playtest this material, you can find it at the Wizards website. You can find it on our community Discord server, which you can join down below here on Twitch. And then, of course, it is also available on D&D Beyond. Now, I do have D&D Beyond pulled up behind here so we can double check the changes to some of these different spells and see how they worked previously versus how they work now. Let's see here. So here are the new updates for this. If you want to play test, like I said, get the material, use the 2014 Player's Handbook, and then all the changes herein. Smite spells now work with melee weapons and unarmed strikes, not ranged weapons, and only 2 of the spells, Searing Smite and Wrathful Smite, are on the Divine Spell list. The rest are Paladin exclusive spells. And see, this goes back to the whole thing of changing the spell lists around to Arcane, Divine, and Feral, but they're still having exceptions. So even though they're wanting to streamline it, they're still making it more complicated by just leaving every class having their own spell list. Because there's going to be so many different exceptions from each class. Well, yeah, you can pick this from Arcane, but only these things. You can't have these and stuff like that. So they just need to go back to just plain class spell lists for everything. Banishing Smite once again requires concentration, but allows only one saving throw, not one at the end of each of the target's turns. As in 2014, it doesn't permanently banish creatures like the Banish spell. Blinding Smite has no initial saving throw, meaning the target is blinded automatically, but the target can end the effect with a subsequent saves. The skill is now evocation rather than transmutation. Interesting. Conjure Barrage is now a range exclusive spell, and it now works with any melee weapon. It deals 5d8 rather than 3d8, and has gained at higher level section. It's going to be interesting. Conjure Volley is now a ranger exclusive spell and works with any melee weapon. As mentioned earlier, of course, there's no ranger spell list. There's primal spell lists and divine spell lists, but these aren't going to be any spell lists because they're exclusive to those classes. So again, bring back class spell lists. It's much easier that way. Divine Smite is a new paladin exclusive spell designed to unify the Smite family of effects. Before they were all spells except Divine Smite. Now they're all spells, making it easier to figure out how to use these effects from turn to turn. Elementalism is a new cantrip, of course. Hunter's Mark is now ranger exclusive. Don't do the damage once per turn instead of every attack, and its damage now increases at higher levels. Power Word Heal is now an enchantment spell, and the range is increased to 60 feet. Power Word Kill now deals damage to a target that has more than 100 hit points. Yeah, because before, just if they had 100 hit points or less, they would die, and I think that was the only effect. Searing Smite now deals its ongoing damage before the saving throw is made and doesn't require concentration. Shining Smite, formerly Glimmering Smite, now prevents the target from benefiting from the invisible condition. Thunder Smite, once again, an evocation. Vicious Mockery now scales only with your Bard level, and its damage is increased from 1d4 to 1d6. You can also target a creature you see or hear, not just see, and that creature doesn't need to hear you to be affected by the magic. That's, I completely disagree with that. The whole concept of it being a cantrip is that it increases the dice as they level. No reason to make a specific change just for that spell. I mean, unless they're doing it to playtest doing certain things with other spells like that. But the whole concept of Vicious Mockery is that you're mocking them verbally. So if the creature couldn't hear you, I'm sorry, it shouldn't be affected by the magic. But we'll see. Wrath of Spite no longer requires concentration. It's now Necromancy and deals necrotic damage rather than psychic. So, putting that in as a... Okay, so Wrathful Smite, I think that's the first level spell, or second level spell, is not one of the Smite spells in the list. So it's probably not a Paladin exclusive. Alright, let's check them out. Banishing Smite. Let's pull up Banishing Smite on our spells on D&D Beyond. All right, Banishing Smite. Here's the new one. As you hit the creature with your stroke, it's a bonus action which you take immediately after hitting a creature with a melee weapon or an unarmed strike. So it's a bonus action that you do as soon as you hit. So you can, in the middle of that strike, you can use a bonus action. As you hit the creature, your strike erupts with divine power. The target hit by the strike takes an extra 5d10 force damage from the attack. If the attack reduces the target to 50 hit points or fewer, the target must succeed on a charisma saving throw or be transported to a harmless demi-plane for the duration. While in the demi-plane, the target has the incapacitated condition. When the spell ends on the target, it reappears in the space it left or in the nearest unoccupied space if that space is occupied. You have to concentrate it up to a minute. So the old one said the next time you hit a creature with a weapon attack before the spell ends, your weapon crackles with force, and the attack deals an extra 5d10 force damage to the target. Additionally, if the attack reduces the target to 50 points or here, you banish it. If the target is named to a different plane of existence than you're on, the target disappears, returning to its home plane. I think Banishment's a 5th level spell as well. I don't see the problem with, allowing a Paladins, because I don't think Banishment it might be on the Divine list now. Just seems to be overly complicating stuff. But now, the creature automatically takes the extra damage, and then if it is reduced to 50% or 50 hit points or less, it has to make the save. So this time it's basically you concentrate it for until 1 minute to keep them banished, but you only have to cast the spell as a bonus action after you hit a creature. Okay. Definitely changing up some action economy there. So now we have Blinding Smite. Bonus action, which you take immediately after hitting a creature. So I guess they're changing these around. And it lasts for 1 minute. There's no concentration on it, which makes it a little bit better. Because, I mean, some of the concentration on things like this, for example, where obviously if you missed, when you cast the spell as a bonus action, if you missed, you could concentrate on it for so long until you hit. Now they're just taking that away from a lot of them. Like, obviously, Banishing Smite, they still have the concentration on there because you're concentrating on keeping them banished to that demi-plane. But Blinding Smite, you hit the target, it flares with light. Target hit by the strike takes an extra 3d8 radiant. And the target has the blinded condition until the spell ends. At the end of each turn, the blinded target repeats the saving throw, ending the spell on itself on a success. Now, interesting. I don't personally myself like the idea of not giving them a saving throw on the hit. But the fact that it's basically a free blind with extra damage, and then at the end of their turn they get another saving throw, or they get a saving throw to see if it ends. It's interesting. Now they are allowing your extra higher levels abilities, so you can add your extra dice there. All right, interesting. What was the older version of it? Oops. Next time, of course, it was duration, concentration, 1 minute, bonus action. Next time you hit a creature with a melee weapon flashes. And then, of course, it did make a saving throw or be blinded. Conjure Barrage, you brandish the weapon. Now, see, here's the whole thing of the Conjure Barrage and the Conjure Volley. Like these barrages and volleys, the whole concept and idea of them is that you're using a weapon with ammunition, or even a ranged weapon, like you could conjure a barrage of javelins, or conjure a barrage of or volley of hand axes that you're throwing, or whatever. The idea that you can use this and it conjures up a bunch of scimitars is just very interesting. How they're trying to change it around. I don't know. Oh, shoot. Give me 1 second. I'll be right back. Left my drink over there, just like last night. Oops. All right. So you brandish the weapon. First of all, it's an action. Instantaneous. A 60-foot cone. You brandish the weapon used to cast the spell and conjure similar spectral weapons or ammunition appropriate to that spell. Then shoot forward and then disappear. Each creature of your choice that you can see within a 60-foot cone must succeed on a dexterity saving throw. A creature takes 5d force damage on a failed save, or half as much on a successful save. Cast at its 4th level or higher. The damage is increased by 1d8 for each slot level above 3rd. So you could basically get it up to 7d8 force damage. It's just a pure ranger, as you only get up to 5th level spells. Depending on how they do the multi-class spell casting, again, is going to be interesting. Conjure Volley. So this one is just a cylinder, a radius instead of a cone. And it's going to be 8d8 force damage on a failed save, or half as much on a successful one. Both of them are 5th level spells. One of them you can upcast, the other one you can't. Okay. All right, let's see this new spell, Divine Smite. Bonus action when you hit a target. You see that target, your strike glows. The divine power of the target takes an extra 2d8 radiant damage from the attack. The attack increases by 1d8 if it is fiend or undead. So they're basically turning it into a spell. The old Divine Smite ability is basically turning it into a spell that you can cast once a day without expending a spell slot. And then you can spend other spell slots to cast it like normal. Obviously, you can only cast it once per turn. And then if you use it of higher, it does an extra d8 for each slot above the first. Okay, I can see. I can see that. All right, elementalism. Action is just cast time in action, 30 feet, instantaneous. Exert control over the elements, creating one of the following effects within range. You create a breeze strong enough to ripple cloth, stir dust, rustle leaves, and close open doors and shutters, all in a 5-foot cube. Doors and shutters being held open by someone or something are affected. You're going to have players going to try to argue that this would like get rid of certain gases and things like that, even though it's a cantrip. Back in Earth, you create a thin shroud of dust or sand that covers surfaces in a 5-foot square area, or use a single word to appear in your handwriting in a patch of dirt or sand. Back in Fire, create a thin cloud of harmless embers and colored scented smoke in a 5-foot cube. You choose the color and scent, and the embers can light candles, torches, or lamps in that area. The smoke scent lingers for 1 minute. Back in Water, you create a spray of cool mist that lightly dampens creatures and objects in a 5-foot cube. Alternatively, you create 1 cup of clean water, either in an open container or on a surface, and the water evaporates in a minute. Sculpt element. You cause dirt, sand, fire, smoke, mist, or water that can fit in a 1-foot cube to assume a crude shape for an hour. All right, now Fine Seed is now again specifically Paladin. So again, they go back to the otherworldly steed for a separate stat block instead of very similar to what they should do to keep for like find familiar, shape change, all of that. Just make it one certain simple thing, because it's really so many players want to, as a druid, shapeshift into a velociraptor. It's like, if you live in Icewind Dale, how are you going to see a velociraptor? You know. Let's see here. See, as an ally to you and your companions, the combat shares your initiative count and functions as a controlled mount while you ride it. If you have an incapacitated condition, the seed takes its turn immediately after yours and acts independently, focusing on protecting you. Steed disappears and drops with 0 hit points if you dismiss it, or if you dismiss it as a bonus action, or if you die. When it disappears, it leaves behind anything it was wearing or carrying. If you cast the spell again, you decide whether you summon the steed that disappeared or a different one. Higher level spell, yep, in the stat block. Very awesome. It's got a slam. Oh, it can face step. If it's fiend, it can fell glare. Or healing touch. Interesting. It's a 2nd level spell, right? For a paladin, so you're not going to get it to like 4th or 5th level. Something like that, maybe a little higher, I don't know. Well, they do have spell casting at 1st level this time around. I'm not sure. I'd have to go back up there and check. Hunter's Mark, ranger only. Choose 1 creature you can see within range. Mark is your quarry. Until the spell ends, you deal extra d6 force damage. target up to your hit points for the spell ends. You use bonus action to mark a new creature. When you cast as a third or fourth level, you can maintain your concentration on the spell for up to 8 hours, and an extra damage increases to 2d6. When you use a spell slot of 5th level or higher, you can maintain your concentration on the spell for up to 24 hours, and the extra damage increases to 3d6. Stealing something from the Warlock's Hex spell. Power Word Heal. If heal energy washes over a creature you can see within range, the target regains all its hit points. If the creature has the charmed, dazed, frightened, paralyzed, or stunned condition, the condition ends. If the creature has the prone condition, it uses this reaction to stand up. They really need to put something in there about it also loses all of its levels of exhaustion. Because giving someone back all of their hit points if they have 10 levels of exhaustion that causes them to die. You know, get them to do these reactions, stand up, and then nope, their exhaustion comes in. Power Word Kill. You utter a word of power that can compel one creature you can see within range to die instantly. If the creature you choose has hit points or fewer, it dies. Otherwise, the target takes 12d12 psychic. That's cool. Searing Smite is on the Divine list, not a Paladin exclusive. It'll last for 1 minute. You have to concentrate on it. So this is going to be a question on this, for example, as you hit the target, your strike flares with white hot intensity, and the target takes an extra 1d6 fire damage from the attack and ignites with magical fire. At the start of each of its turns, until the spell ends, the target takes 1d6 fire damage and then must make a Constitution saving throw. On a failed save, the spell continues. On a successful save, the spell ends. So the question is that if they fail to save, do you still get to do when you hit the target, or is as you hit the target when you first cast it? Most likely, it's intended to be when you first cast it, and then every turn it continues on. But unless it's worded in there, players are going to argue. Well, it says this, and certain DMs, certain players are going to argue one way. I think the intent, obviously, of the spell is that as you hit the target, when you cast the spell, because it's a bonus action that you take immediately after hitting the target with a melee weapon or an armed strike, and as you hit the target, it flares, and it takes an extra d6 fire from the attack. So it shouldn't last, that extra d6 fire shouldn't last after the first hit. But, of course, anything that's not made specific, some players and DMs are going to argue the other way. So that might be something that they'll need to look into. When you cast a spell using second level slot, second level or higher, slot of second level or higher, any damage dealt by the spell increases by die 6 for each slot above first. Shining Smite, Paladin only. As you hit the creature, your strike flares with divine light. The target hit by the strike takes an extra 2d6 radiant damage from the attack. If the target has the invisible condition, that condition on ends. In addition, until the spell ends, the target sheds bright light in a 5-foot radius, can't roll attack rolls against it have advantage, and can't benefit from the invisible condition. Third level or higher, it gets an extra d6. Staggering Smite, Paladin only. And that lasts concentration up to a minute. As you hit the creature, your strike pierces both body and mind. The target takes extra 4d6 psychic damage to the attack, and the target must succeed on a wisdom saving throw or have a stun condition until the end of your next turn. You cast this spell using a spell slot of 5th level. The extra damage increases by 1 die 6. Interesting. I don't know. For me, it just seems that there's no rhyme or reason by changing certain things that do a die 6, certain things that do a die 8. Like your Divine Smite does a die 8, and then these volleys and such do die 8s, and then other ones do die 6. It's almost as if they took the template that they did for the 5th edition stuff and just kind of threw that template out the window. Thunder Smite, as you hit the target, your strike rings thunder, audible within 300 feet of you. At least they're consistent on that. Anything that does thunder like that is 300 feet of the sound. Extra 2d6 thunder. Additionally, if the target is a creature, it must succeed on a strength saving throw or be pushed 10 feet away from you and have the prone condition. So basically just a targeted thunder wave for one creature. That I can actually see as just as it is because of the fact that they're already going to take your weapon damage and your ability to score modifiers on from the weapon damage as a bonus action. With it being paladin only, it's most likely going to be with your Divine Smite and Thunder Smite as your first level spells. Yeah, so you can cast that once a day for free. Interesting. I like that spell. I like that a lot. And here's how they changed Vicious Mockery. You release a string of insults laced with subtle enchantments. At one creature you can see or hear within range. Target must succeed on a Wisdom saving throw or take 1d6 psychic damage and have disadvantage on the next attack roll it makes before the end of its next turn. Now see, they clarified in the thing that they don't have to hear you to be affected, but they don't say anything about it in the spell. I still believe that they have to be able to hear you to, react to your vicious mockery, unless it's some sort of telepathic enchantment, something or other. I don't know. I do like it was moved up to die 6, though. I think the reason why it was to die 4 before was because there were so few things that did psychic damage, then they just added more and more psychic damage to it. Finally, Wrathful Smite, first level spell, is not a paladin specific spell, it's a divine spell. Extra d6 necrotic damage from the attack, and it must succeed on a wisdom saving throw or have a frightened condition until the spell ends. See, like this one, they're still keeping the wisdom save for the frightened, but they're not giving them a con save for the blinded. Again, as I've talked through this whole series looking at the playtest material, it's the consistency and the inconsistency between how they do certain things. As we mentioned before, there's the whole idea of 2 different types of templates for area of effect spells. When the spell appears, and then at the beginning of the turn if they're in it, or at the end of the turn if they're still in it, or when they enter it for the first time or start their turn there. Those 2 different wordings are great, but being consistent with these spells do it this way, these spells do it that way, and it's fairly simple. And when they have some of these are concentrations, some of them are not concentrations, some of them allow saves, some of them don't allow saves, some do die 8, some do die 6. It's just interesting. All right, feats. Go check out these feats. Must be the prerequisite, of course. Benefit of the feat and repeatable, for example, like skilled, you want to pick up skills, something like that. So, bonus feats at 20th level. DM Key's bonus feats is a form of advancement after characters reach 20th level to provide greater power to characters who have no more levels to gain. With this approach, each character gains 1 feat of their choice for every 30,000 experience points the character earns above 355,000. Epic boon feats are especially appropriate for those bonus feats, but a player can choose any feat for which their 20th level character qualifies. That is going to be interesting if they continue to keep the Adventurers League in the form that the Adventurers League is now, which if you watch our live streams on Sunday evenings, we do play Adventurers League rules. And when we stream our virtual D&D weekend Sunday evening streams, those are D&D Adventures League rules as well. Typically, a character can level after every adventure they play. So literally, you can play, 19, 20 adventures, and your character can be up to 20th level. So if they're going to put that in there every time a 20th level character plays an adventure, they're going to be able to get an extra feat or one of these epic boon feats. Most likely, they'll probably change that in Adventurers League for like once every 5 adventures. Hopefully, they'll do something along those lines, because it does make it really beneficial for the characters that are 20th level and want to continue to play Tier 4 stuff. I've got a number of 20th level Adventurers League characters that sometimes it just gets boring because you really don't get anything else but gold, and you can amass, cool magic items and stuff if you haven't played the adventures with your characters. But at the same time, there's just not a whole lot of high level content out there. Mostly, this would be something that you'd probably see in homebrew games. That there are the occasional homebrew games that do go past, 11th, 12th, 13th level, but the majority of campaigns always, end around there. Obviously, there are older campaigns that people have been playing, like first edition, playing this, the same adventuring party for, 30, 40 years. But of course, this is 5.5 or 1D&D, whatever you want to call it. All right, so let's check out these new feats and some of the feat changes. The following feats presented in alphabetical order. Side note, feat updates. Main changes in the feats are right here. Sorry, give me a second here. Ability score improvement now allows an ability score to go as high as 22 if the feat is taken at 19th level. It'd be really awesome for them to change not only the maximum increases to 22. It would really be interesting. It'd be nice for them to change these ability score improvement feats to be you can increase an ability score above 20 using this feat. However, if you're at least the 19th level, the maximum increases to 22. Obviously, you have books and tomes that increase your maximum by 2. But say, for example, you haven't gotten to, say you get a book that increases your intelligence by 2 and increases your maximum to 22. Those things feel as if they should stack in certain ways. Obviously, if you read something when you're 18th level or 18th with an 18 intelligence and increases it to 20, maybe you're getting it too early in the campaign. Maybe you're not taking the ability score improvement feats, but there needs to be some sort of wordings in these feats that allow, like, for example, I haven't taken ability score improvement feat, but I did get a tome of intelligence, and my intelligence was only 18. My intelligence goes up to 20. I should still be able to take this, even if I'm 19th level, to get it to 22 because I didn't use it to take it to 20. So something around there would probably be something to be changed kind of in the text a little bit. So now they're changing the fighting styles to feats. Plus 2 to bonus attack rolls make with ranged weapons. If you're wearing armor, you get a +1 to bonus armor class. Plus 2 to damage rolls, of course. I mean, you can have a shield, obviously. Great weapon fighting, a roll of 1 or 2 on the die. You can re-roll the dice and use the new roll. Keep in mind, the longbows are two-handed. It does actually say melee weapon here, which is interesting. It'd be nice for them to open that up. I mean, I know they do have the +2 to attack rolls up here. I'm pretty sure they might have changed the crossbow expert. I'm recall in a previous play test, they did change the crossbow expert because the crossbow expert actually had a separate, two separate abilities in there, which actually allowed casters with the crossbow expert feat to be able to cast spells when they're within 5 feet of a melee combatant, which normally it's a disadvantage. So basically, you can use this with a longsword. Since a longsword is, you can use it, it is versatile, so you can use it two-handed. Protection, reaction, interpose your shield, impose disadvantage. To weapon fighting, extra attack granted by the light weapon property. You can add your ability modifier to the damage of that extra attack. Really like to see the wording of how the dual wielder feat is going to be, just because this does specifically say the light weapon property. Hopefully, the dual wielder feat will say something along the lines of that. How we always talk about general, and then specific overrides generals. Like you have a general rule, very similar to Magic and D&D. It's in most games. Most games will have the general rules of how things work, and then another rule will come along that is a specific rule that will override a general rule. So hopefully they'll put something that will override these two different things, because they did specifically said extra attack granted by the light weapon property. And the weapons. Of course, they're introducing weapon mastery properties, which is going to obviously complicate the game a bit more. I mean, I always talk about this. Hello, Amber. How's it going? Hope your streams were great today. Hope you got a lot of either kills with the family or escapes playing Texas Chainsaw. But yeah, as I've mentioned lots of times in the chats, 5th edition is very nostalgic because it brought it back to a more simplified game. 2nd edition, you started seeing, a little bit of stuff coming in there, especially when they introduced the black books towards the end of 2nd edition with the skills and powers and all of that stuff, splitting your ability scores into 2 different scores. And of course, 3rd edition came around and really complicated things out with, massive number of different skills required for all these different things. Invest is sitting here for a hot minute just listening. No worries, no worries. We're just this material is the play test. I think I mentioned it earlier when I was watching your stream earlier while you were playing DBD about Baldur's Gate, and how Baldur's Gate is using some of this playtest material that's right here, which is going for the new books. Basically, Wizards of the Coast, who makes Dungeons and Dragons, every few months they'll put out something called Unearthed Arcana, which actually is the name of an old book from like 1st edition D&D, because D&D's basically been through, as it is, I want to say 7 editions ish. Maybe 8 editions, depending on your things with the different basic sets back in the day. Because there was original D&D, which is like came from off your chainmail. Then there was the single book basic expert and such like that. Then there was the multiple book Menser basic expert companion and all that. And then there's AD&D, which is considered 1st edition, 2nd, 3rd, 3.5. 4th and 5th edition. 5th edition is the most current version of the game right now. But as we were mentioning, the 5th edition rules brought back that nostalgic, very simplified, I should say a simpler version of playing D&D. That way the rules don't get too involved and overshadow the game itself as it's obviously evolved into a collaborative storytelling game. And adding these, again, I'm reacting to these the first time reading all these. We did talk about mastery, weapon mastery and such like that before, but it's just an extra thing that DMs and players are going to have to stop a game to, okay, well, you got this weapon property, it's got a special thing, it can do this. Oh wait, you didn't have that yesterday, but you picked it up this morning when your character, woke up after a long rest. They can change those around. So it's just, I mean, interesting ideas. A lot of times, I think it would be cool to add certain things to, like magic items. They introduce so many different feats and so many different things and changes to characters and their the class features and stuff like such like that. But adding certain things to like common magic items that could give them an ability to do this, or certain things that they could have that I just think they're too involved in trying to answer newer players or inexperienced players' ideas with, well, I don't want to play it that way. I want to play it this way, which is fine because it is D&D, and DMs can have their own house rules, and DMs can work with their players to change those rules around. But implementing such rules into the game just kind of complicates stuff. I do like the change from a trident to D8. I love that already. The net, I've already talked about making that adventure gear rather than a weapon because it's actually not really a weapon. You just use it to either restrain or grapple. Short sword is returned to being a martial weapon. That's I don't know. I think short swords being a just a common weapon would be fine because I mean there's no reason why a wizard couldn't pick up a short sword instead of a dagger. It's just like twice the length of a dagger instead of just a dagger. I always think of a short sword as double the length of a dagger, and then a long sword being a short sword length with an extra dagger onto a two-handed sword being two long swords length. We used to have the bastard sword back in the day, but people don't want to use the term in D&D, which is understandable. So being that there's so much backstory and guidelines and lore with D&D, how would you recommend people get into D&D for the first time without being super overwhelmed and lost? As I mentioned, they have, here, give me 1 second. I'm going to grab it. I'm going to go to my break screen. I'm going to grab one of the box sets. A couple of them back here. I'll be right back. All right, there's a few different starter sets that are out there. There's the initial starter set that came out when 5th edition first came out in 2014. There's a update of that, which is called the Essentials Kit, which they came up with a few years after that. And then they actually have a Stranger Things branded basic set, a starter set as well. And then last year, pardon me, they came out with the newest starter set, which even simplifies the rules even more. It's the Dragons of Stormwreck Isle. It's it's got some really fun stuff in there. The Essentials Kit has adventures. The first starter set that they came out with had a really fun adventure in it called the Mines of Fandelver. And it really, really walks through the basics of the game for the DM and for the player. I mean, you could take this, actually the new one, the starter set Dragons of Stormwreck Isle, and sit down with players that have never played before and a DM that's never DM'd before and learn how to play D&D together. A lot of it is just, I mean, the whole thing of playing D&D is there's no specific way to play it. There are a bunch of rules, obviously, but you can ignore all those rules if you want and just pick out what you want and play how you want. That's the beautiful thing about role-playing games is that you tailor them to your own groups and such. One of the things that I'm talking about a lot is the fact that I work with their organized play system with Wizards of the Coast and Dungeons & Dragons called the Adventurers League. I write adventures for those. I run a lot of events. We run Adventurers League events for their in-house games for Wizards of the Coast employees when new products come out and such. So the Adventurers League is rules as written. So we have to follow all of the rules versus a homebrew game, where if you're just playing with a bunch of your friends, you can throw out this rule. We don't like this. We're going to use this variant rule. We're going to allow this type of stuff to happen, and that's the fun of D&D, is that you can totally follow whatever rules you want to follow. The reason why I talk about it is, though, because we play Adventurers League, and they have to follow the rules, because the players can play an Adventurers League game at a convention in California and then go back to their local game store if they're playing Adventurers League and play that same character, because it makes the characters portable for that organized play. But yeah, it's not as in depth as I'm talking about when I'm talking about stuff here. So then it comes down, it's got the properties, and it's got the different mastery things now that everyone's going to have to. Again, if you're running homebrew, you don't have to use mastery. Hopefully, they're going to put weapon mastery as a variant rule, very similar to how they had flanking and stuff like that in the DMG. Hopefully, they're going to make weapon mastery a variant feat that DMs can choose to use. That way it's not going to be bogged down for their organized play. Or simple weapon, not common weapon. Too many additions to remember. That's why I always tell everyone, it's like, I hope you know the rules, because I've always mixed up my additions. Like, someone wanted to cast a teleport spell the other day, and I was like, you got any 5th level spots? And they're like, teleport's a 7th level spell. And I was like, what? Completely forgot that it was different. We were playing 5th edition, because teleport used to be a 5th level spell back in 1st, 2nd edition. I actually had mentioned something a few weeks back about having a player make a fortitude save instead of a con save, and it was so funny. I was talking to James Wyatt, who's one of the creates tons of content, pretty much every edition of D&D, and he signed a book for me and said, "Give me a fort," and then he scratched it out, said Constitution save, which I thought was pretty cool. Yep, they are putting in the musket still, and the pistol, that doesn't bother me too much. It's going to be interesting to see how it works out, how many DMs use it. I've always used pistols and muskets and top loader guns and things like that. And most of my campaign, most of the history of my campaign world, I've had those in there with different rules, and then updated them when newer editions came out. And different mastery properties, all of that. When you attack action on your turn and attack with a light weapon, you can make one extra attack as a bonus action later on the same turn. That extra attack must be made with a different light weapon. This was from earlier. We were talking about making the decision with the fighting style and the wording of it. It was so much easier with the older explanation in 5th edition, where it was in the combat section it said offhand weapon or extra weapon, Talks about the different properties. Obviously, these are going to be the mastery properties of the weapons. Your Grays and Nick and such like that, and different classes will have chances to get some of the weapon mastery stuff on top of that. Of course, net is now that all of the priest pack, all the different packs are going down to I think 1 gold or something like that. They were talking about changing those as well. And then we have some of the rules glossaries changes. Again, as I mentioned, for people that play, if you want to play test any of this material, you can find it on our Discord server, which you can join below by clicking the About Us section. You just click on the Discord tab. You can join the Master Judges Community server. If you select the D&D News role, you'll have access to the one D&D playtest material that's there. You can go to D&D Beyond, get that information as well. You can also go to the Wizards of the Coast website to get this playtest material if anyone wants to play test it out. Armor training instead of armor proficiency now, which is totally fine. Your attack action. Make one attack with a weapon or an armed strike. Now, they're also, I can see them wanting to change this around because it became, it seemed confusing to some players. But I always was able to explain it to them fairly easily, and they usually got how it worked. It wasn't a big deal, especially when it was like stowing weapons, drawing weapons, and such like that. Now they're just kind of changing it around a little bit so that it's a little bit easier to explain and also not as limiting as it was before. For example, it used to be where if you were fighting with two weapons and you had them both drawn, you can draw your first weapon on the first turn, and then the next turn you'd have to draw the second weapon before, and now you can just pull them both out and go right off the bat. So you can either, as part of the attack, equip or unequip a weapon. Now, what they're also doing with that is that say you have two attacks as a fighter. What it's allowing you to do is say you come up and you drop down a certain monster that you're fighting with your longsword, and there's not another creature nearby in your melee range. It's going to allow you to stow that weapon after the attack, and then when you go to take your extra attack from like a class feature, you could pull out your crossbow and then fire your crossbow, or pull out your longbow and fire your longbow as part of, so you can stow it, the longsword as part of the action, and you can pull out the other bow before the attack for the next attack, which makes it a lot better than just having to drop your longsword, then pull out your bow, etc. My apologies. You might hear my familiar. She's awake and she's deaf, and I think my wife's on the phone, so she normally picks her up when I'm streaming on here. But you can hear her. Sorry, she's deaf, so she's just crying because she can't find me. Blindside, I really love that they added Blindside in I think it came in with Tasha's, but it's always an ability for the monsters, it's a trait for monsters to have, but I love that they gave the players access to Blindsight, which is great. But yeah, there's a few more pages of the rules glossary. Unfortunately, it's getting close to the end of the stream, and so we're going to discuss moving the Tavern Talks stream to different times. What we'll probably do next week is still go ahead and have our 7 to 8 Eastern stream so that we can finish up these different glossary things, see how they've changed, how that might change for the playtest. Again, this is all playtest material. This is not the final forms of the rules and such that are going to go into the 50th anniversary books that come out next year. And once they have some more playtest material come out, we'll start discussing that as well. As I've said before, when the playtest material comes out, I don't look at it. I'll look at it for the first time on stream, so it's kind of getting my initial reaction from it. If there is discussion about, like, if I have a difference of opinion later on, I might come back and say, hey, I kind of see how this works a little bit differently, and all of that. But again, these are just my opinions. Everyone's free to take it with a grain of salt, look at it a different way, or have different opinions of how things work. But first, of course, we're bringing the stream to an end, so we want to thank all of our supporters, especially our patrons from Patreon. Now, if you'd like to help support the channel, please consider becoming a patron or subbing here on Twitch, twitch.tv/themasterofdungeons. We love Prime subs. If you have Amazon Prime, link it to your Twitch account, get you a free sub every month. Bring those over here. We love them. Also, the link to our Patreon page, as well as our YouTube channel, and all of our social media accounts can be found in the About Us section below here on Twitch. If you would subscribe to us on YouTube, we have tons of videos up there, like 80, 85 videos. So go check those out as well. Like and comment on the videos, share them. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. Give us likes, retweets, all that good stuff. Every sub, like, and share helps us immensely. As I mentioned before, if you want to join the Master of Dungeons Community Discord server, that link is in the About Us section below here on Twitch. Just click on the Discord panel. It'll give you an invite to the server where you can help shape an accepting, caring, and inclusive community. We also have the merch store available. We've got some great T-shirts in there, I think a hoodie, some ball caps, some glassware, left and right handed mugs, coffee mugs. So getting stuff from the merch store definitely helps out as well. And then we will be back tomorrow from 2 p.m. to 4 or 5 p.m. with our dungeon delving stream. We'll do that on Thursday and Friday. Of course, we are playing Baldur's Gate 3, the new D&D video game that came out a few weeks back, out of pre-play and all that, the official released version of that. We started last Thursday. We had a wizard that we played. Just trying the game out. I actually did start a separate game with a different character just to get a bit more of the feel of the controls. That way it's not too boring watching us play. So tomorrow what we'll do is we'll get on at 2. We'll have opened up to character creation, and if we have anyone viewing at the beginning, we'll make a character from the get-go right there. But we will see you tomorrow. Thanks for watching tonight. Tell your friends about us, and have a great evening. And as always, happy adventuring. Take care.